Tanama Rupa Charitadu Sakirtananu Smrityo Kramena Rastanamanasi Niyoja Tishtan Vraje Tanaragi Tananugami Kalam Nayat Akilam Itividesha Saram. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, nicely hearing and chanting about the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Braj, Goloka Vrindavan, and serve Krishna under the guidance of the Lord's devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. So let me read that. Let me read that again. Slower. The essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. This way one should reside in Braj, Goloka Vrindavan, and serve Krishna under the guidance of the Lord of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Since the mind may be one's enemy or one's friend, one has to train the mind to become his friend. The Krishna consciousness movement is especially meant for training the mind to be always engaged in Krishna's business. The mind contains hundreds and thousands of impressions, not only of this life, but of many, many lives of the past. These impressions sometimes come in contact with one another and produce contrary pictures. In this way, the mind's function can become dangerous for a conditioned soul. Students of psychology are aware of the mind's various psychological changes. In the Bhagavad Gita 8.6, it is said, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, tyajantant kalevaram, tam tam evaiti kontiya, sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. At the time of death, the mind and intelligence of the living entity create the subtle form of a certain type of body for the next life. If the mind suddenly thinks of something not very congenial, one has to take a corresponding birth in the next life. On the other hand, if one can think of Krishna at the time of death, he can be transferred to the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. This process of transmigration is very subtle. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami advises devotees to train their minds in order that they will be unable to remember anything other than Krishna. Similarly, the tongue should be trained to speak only of Krishna and to taste only Krishna prasad. Srila Rupa Goswami further advises, Tistan Vraje, one should live in Vrindavan or any part of Brajabhumi. Brajabhumi, or the land of Vrindavan, is supposed to be 84 kroshas in area. 1 krosha equals 2 square miles. When one makes Vrindavan his residence, he should take shelter of an advanced devotee there. This way one should always think of Krishna and his pastimes. This is further elucidated by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Krishna smaram janam tasya preshtam nija samihitam tat katam ritascha so koryadvasam rajaya sada. Devotees should always reside in the transcendental realm of Braj and always engage in Krishna smaranam janam tasya preshtam, remembrance of Krishna and his beloved associates. By following the footsteps of such associates and by entering under their eternal guidance, one can acquire an intense desire to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Again, Srila Rupa Goswami states in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Seva Saraka Rupena, Siddha Rupena Chatrahi, Tat Bhavana Lipsana Karya, Raja Loka Anusarataha. In the transcendental realm of Raja Dhamma, one should serve the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna, with a feeling similar to that of his associates, and one should place himself under the direct guidance of a particular associate of Krishna and follow in his footsteps. This method is applicable both in the stage of sadhana, spiritual practices, executable in the stage of bondage, and in the stage of sadhya, God realization, when one is a siddha purusha or a spiritually perfect soul. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has commented as follows upon this verse. One who has not yet developed an interest in Krishna consciousness should give up all material motives, train his mind by following the progressive regular principles, namely chanting and remembering Krishna and his name, form, quality, pastimes, etc. So that's the first stage of this verse, where it is said, Tanama Rupacharitadi. Let's offer our obeisances to Prabhupada first. Namo Vishnu Braya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pacharane, Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Siddharne. Srila Prabhupada didn't speak so much about Srimati Radharani in his classes. Even on Radhastami, Prabhupada didn't talk so much about Srimati Radharani, except that all devotional service falls under her jurisdiction, which means everything that we're doing is under Srimati Radharani's jurisdiction. But her jurisdiction comes in 3 different phases, as explained in this verse. Namely, the beginning we have to hear and chant about Krishna. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada has given us a program, a morning program, for instance, where we get up early enough that we have our minds are more or less not bewildered by the passion of the afternoon or later in the day. Generally, in the morning, our minds should be more peaceful, as if we didn't eat too much the night before. Then the result is that we can hear and chant about Krishna by chanting japa, by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, worshiping the deity, in the association of the devotees, hearing and chanting, and in a spiritual atmosphere. Then it's more likely that our minds will actually accept the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, namely the philosophy of devotion. If our minds are too much disturbed by ignorance and passion, then even in the morning, our morning sadhana will be spent mostly to clear away the previous day's ignorance and passion. And after that ignorance and passion is cleared away in our minds from the previous day, then hopefully we don't start the same activities that we did the day before that resulted in our minds becoming filled with ignorance and passion. Therefore, our program that Prabhupada gave us was not only our sadhana in the morning, but somehow or another devoting the rest of the day to spreading Krishna consciousness. Then in the evening we come back and we're supposed to, again, purify our consciousness and fix it in Krishna consciousness by the same process that we performed in the morning. That used to be known as the transcendental sandwich. 2 sadhanas as the 2 parts of the bread, and then the inside, the transcendental service of spreading Krishna consciousness. Now, even these classes that we have, even our studying the books, is not meant for mental speculation. The whole conclusion of after studying is that I should perform devotional service. If after studying, we think ourselves to be a great scholar, or we think that there's some other activity more important than devotional service, then we've missed the whole point. That the whole point is to hear and chant about Krishna. So we come to the point of accepting, as it says in the next part here, in this way, developing a taste for such things, one should try to live in Vrindavan and pass his time constantly remembering the Lord's name, form, fame, pastimes, and qualities under the direction of an expert devotee. So in this way, develop a taste for such things. A taste for such things means acceptance. The reason why we don't have a taste when we chant Hare Krishna is that we don't really believe that we're fallen souls. And we don't really believe, even if we have some idea that I might be a fallen soul, that I really need Krishna's help so much. After all, I have a steady income. I have prasadam every day. I have a nice place to sleep, etc. So it'd be nice if Krishna gives me his mercy, but after all, my life is pretty much stable. I'm not really in such a difficult position. Therefore, I don't really need Krishna's mercy that much. I may need a little bit to keep the income coming in. Make sure that we pray that there's food in the grocery store for me to buy with the money that Krishna is supplying me. But this idea that any moment I may leave my body and what I'm thinking of will determine my next lifetime is generally not so prominent in the mind of the conditioned soul. So that taste for Krishna consciousness doesn't come by some accident. It comes when we get a proper understanding of what our position is. Or as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, that Trinada Pisani Chena Triva Sahishnuna Amainana Madadena Kirtaniyak Siddhari. That we're 1/10,000th the size of the tip of her size, and we're in a very big material body with a very large false ego and very small intelligence. So we're actually in a dangerous position, and therefore we have to learn how to chant Hare Krishna with those qualities. If we want to get the taste for chanting, if we want Krishna to reveal himself to us, then we have to chant Trinada Pi in a humble state of mind. As Prabhupada summed it up, just like a child calling for his mother. Very small babies are actually very proud. If you touch a baby, he's probably not going to say, "Don't touch me, I'm a Brahmin." Or I'm an advanced devotee, don't contaminate me, I'm a great devotee. I only associate with Mahabhagavats. No, most babies are quite humble because they're completely dependent on their parents. Therefore, for a child, you can practically do anything. He practically accepts it. Now, for a baby, if you want to feed him some food, you take a spoon and you go, "This is an airplane," and the baby will follow you, the spoon around, before you feed the baby whatever's in the spoon. Now, if you do that to an adult, they'll be insulted. But for a baby, he thinks it's quite interesting because they're quite innocent. And generally, they're quite tolerant, although they may cry a lot. But still, they have to tolerate because they have no choice. And as far as offering respect to others, they generally at least don't require any respect for themselves, but I don't think they have a means of offering too much respect to others at that particular point. In any case, if we feel the more we feel ourselves helpless, depending upon Krishna, when we chant Hare Krishna, then the more realistic our chanting is. Because right now, if we think we have a very good material situation, we have a very big illusion. Because no one in this material world, from Brahma down to the meanest insect, has a good material situation. Especially since even Brahma has to leave his body, and in his estimation, shortly. And even Brahma cannot be 100% sure unless he's a pure devotee where he's going next. So everyone in the material world has an equally difficult situation in the sense that birth, death, old age, and disease are equally distributed for everyone. What to speak of the other miseries of material life, they're equally available to every conditioned soul. Therefore, one has to hear and chant in such a way as to understand that we're trying to understand that these books actually pertain to me. They're not just some kind of philosophical talk between Krishna and Arjuna so that later on they could print the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna's devotees could go out and sell these books and make enough money to buy bhoga to offer to the deity. That was not the idea of Krishna speaking to Arjuna. The idea was speaking to us so that we can understand that we are actually 1/10,000th the size of tip hair in size, and that everyone else is 1/10,000th the size of tip hair in size, spiritual being. And that by the process of pure devotional service, by utilizing whatever body, whatever mind, whatever intelligence we have, by utilizing that as the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, then gradually Krishna becomes pleased and he reveals himself. Therefore, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he could define the whole process of devotional service in very few verses. Just as when he spoke to Lord Brahma, he spoke the Chatura Sloki verses and defined the entire realm of pure devotional service in just 4 verses. Similarly, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has given us 4 verses where he says that he's the supreme person, the most attractive person, from which everything comes. And then he says, if you want to understand me, then talk about me, especially in association with devotees, with the aim, not just telling some stories so that we can all have a good laugh or a good time. That's not the idea. The idea, Krishna says, is much shita, much gata prana. We're hearing so that we can understand how to put our consciousness on Krishna and dedicate our lives to Krishna. Chitta means consciousness, and prana means energy. Krishna consciousness and pure devotional service. Consciousness of Krishna and using our prana for pure devotional service. Then the result should be, if we're properly engaging ourselves in Krishna consciousness and pure devotional service, then Tushanti and Ramanti. So here it talks about both of those, Ramanti and Tushanti. Tushanti means that we're becoming purified by ecstasy. That by concentrating our minds upon Krishna and by performing pure devotional service, we can actually experience Krishna's presence because Krishna gives us the intelligence to do that. And the result is that we feel some pleasure, some encouragement, we could say, to Shanti, some satisfaction by the fact that we feel our hearts are becoming purified by that happiness and ecstasy in Krishna consciousness. Then Ramanti comes, But one is steadily engaged in devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, beyond the material concept of life, then when one is sufficiently in the fire of Krishna consciousness, then one can experience Krishna much more intimately and deeply, and experiences a much greater intensity of happiness. As in the 6 stages of pure devotional service, Srimati Radharani reveals herself in the state of sadhana bhakti by giving us 2 things, Kleshagni and Subhada. Subhada means the happiness of experiencing something beyond just material sense gratification. The happiness of developing some good qualities. The happiness of realizing that Krishna consciousness is beneficial for everyone, including myself. So even by normal sadhana bhakti, even if it's not completely pure and not completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness, still we get free from some of our sinful desires, some of our material conceptions of life. We experience a happiness greater than material sense gratification. We develop some good qualities. If we look back in our lives before we joined the Hare Krishna movement, that although we were probably some of us were probably on the level or lower than animals in our activities and consciousness, still we didn't think ourselves to be animals. We thought ourselves to be greatly elevated personalities, exalted animals. Maybe on the level of Hanuman or Gajendra or someone. And then when we come to Krishna consciousness and we practice pure devotional service, then we may lament at the present time that I'm not pure, I'm not a great devotee, I still have an arthas, but we're at least on the level of acting as human beings. And at least we know that we don't want to go back to the animal species of life, either as exhibited in our past lives, in this lifetime, our past activities, or certainly we don't want to go into our future lives in the same way we led our younger lives, we could say. And what to speak of becoming an animal in our next lifetime, how unfortunate that would be. So even in sadhana bhakti, we get relief from sinful tendencies and we experience a happiness greater than that's given to us by the prospects of material sense gratification. Punascharvita charvanam, simply chewing the chewed. Then in Bhava Bhakti, which is greatly elevated, then in that stage, that devotional service derides even the conception of liberation. And it's rarely achieved. So derides even the conception of liberation means that in liberation, we're peaceful because we're no longer afraid of dying because we know we're eternal. And therefore, our whole purpose of existence changes because we no longer have to struggle for existence. We may have to struggle for existence, but we're not overly anxious about our survival because we realize and we accept that my body is going to die, but I'm not going to die. And therefore, I don't have to work excessively hard in order to maintain a body that's going to die anyhow. I want to maintain it for Krishna service, but I'm not overly anxious about the fact that I'm growing older and I have to leave my body in a very short period of time. I simply take advantage of whatever opportunities I have in devotional service at the present time. Therefore, liberation is not so important for an ordinary devotee who's trying to get free from distress. Getting free from distress is very important. For a little bit more elevated devotee who wants a more comfortable life, who knows how to choose food when he eats, knows how to breathe, knows how to relate to people in such a way as not to get into a fight every time he meets someone, who knows how to have some kind of proper exchanges with others, that he certainly has learned something. And for the devotee who understands the value of following instructions beyond simply getting something, material remuneration and in turn, but in order to achieve a higher stage of consciousness, then such a devotee, Jnani Bhakta, he certainly has made some advancement and is on a better platform to understand devotional service. And the devotee who's actually liberated himself by Krishna's mercy, by accepting the path of devotional service in the right way, then on that liberated state, they're certainly on a better platform than the other devotees. Krishna says, Tesham Jnana Nityukta Ekabhaktir Vishishate Priyohi Jnanino Yartam Aham Sacha Mama Priyaha. Such a devotee is such a Jnani Bhakta. He's better because he knows principally that his goal of life is to serve Krishna, and he doesn't really need material remuneration in exchange. But a Bhava Bhakti devotee who actually have feeling for Krishna, he doesn't even want liberation because he's already liberated. He simply wants to develop his feelings towards Krishna at the stage of Bhava Bhakti. So we may not be on the stage of Bhava Bhakti, but we can experience Bhava Bhakti. As a matter of fact, the whole process of pure devotional service that we're executing to come to the platform of Krishna consciousness is for even a neophyte devotee who has other aspirations at times, still by the process of pure devotional service, Krishna, he can concentrate his mind upon Krishna by Krishna's mercy, by Krishna giving the intelligence to do so, and by such concentration of the mind, with a proper attitude, just like a child depending upon his parents, his mother, then the result is he can experience transcendental ecstasy on the level of a little bit of bhava, some feeling towards Krishna. And that has to be developed. The aim of our sadhana is to experience bhava. Is not simply to regulate our lives so that we don't get ourselves in trouble. That's okay. But there's something higher than just regulating our lives so we don't get ourselves in difficulty either in this lifetime or the next. We want to experience actually love for Krishna or a little bit of ecstasy at least. Then when that ecstasy increases, as it says here, when we actually get some taste once in a while and that taste becomes concentrated and we come to the stage of bhava, then that's the beginning of pure devotional service. And then it says here, then we can pass our time, try to live in Vrindavan and pass this time constantly remembering Krishna's name, fame, pastimes, and qualities under the direction and protection of an expert devotee. This is the sum and substance of all instruction regarding the cultivation of devotional service. So in one sense, it's not extremely complicated or difficult, but it's a little difficult for us to accept it because we're all living out some kind of drama. Even in devotional service, we have our dramas we're living out. And therefore, even when we're reading Prabhupada's books, still we're missing what he's saying. Because we're hearing more or less through the filter of the drama that we're playing out. But if we can read with a little bit more receptivity and understand the simplicity, therefore, we may not be so much distracted by the drama that we're living in the material world. and we may understand the value of pure devotional service and how it leads us to Krishna consciousness, that's the most essential part of our existence, while we're playing out the drama, whatever drama we happen to be playing out. Therefore, all this knowledge is not meant to make us scholars, it's meant to make us devotees of Krishna, so that when we're chanting Hare Krishna, we're not chanting, oh, the energy of the Lord, oh, the Supreme Lord, I'm a great devotee, so of course you must reveal yourself to me, because I know everything about you. Therefore, you're obliged to reveal. Come on, Krishna, reveal yourself. By my intellectual prowess, I know everything about you. I'm just waiting for you to surrender and reveal yourself to me. Now, by all this accumulation of knowledge and devotional service, it should make us humble. It should make us feeling dependent upon Krishna and realizing without the mercy of Krishna and his devotees, headed by Srimati Radharani and her representatives, then we're in a very difficult, helpless position. And the more we feel like that, then the more Krishna can give us his mercy, because that is the reality. It's not something I made up or Krishna made up. It's actually the reality. We're in a big machine called the material nature, and we're very tiny. And due to our conditioned nature, we're very much inclined to rely upon material nature rather than Krishna as our shelter. Unfortunately, at the time of death, Maya will not give us very much shelter. Only Krishna will give us shelter, and Krishna's devotees. So we have to, in this lifetime, try to rely upon Krishna even while we're alive, because when we have to leave this body, it's not the proper time to start trying to rely upon Krishna. Or as that story goes, one devotee lady was telling her mother at the time of her mother's leaving her body, she was telling her mother, chant, chant, chant. And her mother was going, can't. Or another devotee was telling her parent, my dear parent, please chant Hare Krishna, just when she was leaving her body, her parent. And her parent said, I cannot say so many words, and then left her body. So we should prepare ourselves. And here Prabhupada goes on, although since he was already, he probably was constantly summarizing the different levels of attainment of devotional service. It's not that every verse is something new, but every verse may elaborate upon some of those three stages. The first stage, when we come to accept that Krishna is actually God, that he owns everything, that he's proprietor of everything eternally, and it's foolish try to get something from him. So that's called knowledge, just to accept that Krishna is God. Then when we progress a little further, we accept that Krishna is the enjoyer. I cannot be happy unless I utilize whatever energies Krishna has given me in his service and utilize them under the guidance of Krishna and his devotees. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, as well as the instructions of Krishna by his actual bona fide representatives. I cannot be happy. And when one verses further, one is called karma yoga and jnana yoga. And when one advances to bhakti yoga, not only I'm going to serve Krishna under the guidance of his devotees, but I actually believe that my mission in his life is to try to please Krishna. That Krishna is not just my employer who's giving me a salary, but Krishna is actually my lover, and I'm supposed to love Krishna. That my eternal business is not business with Krishna. My eternal business is to love Krishna. So therefore, whatever I'm doing, when it's actually in the proper consciousness, accepting that I'm simply a servant of Krishna, and I serve Krishna under the guidance of his representatives, himself and his representatives, then I'm doing it to please him. And therefore I can chant Hare Krishna like a child calling for his mother, because I believe I actually have a personal relation with Krishna, and not that of a, as Prahlad Maharaj said, that of a vanik, or as a businessman with Krishna, or business lady. So now Prabhupada summarizes what he said before in a little bit more esoteric way. In the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. So generally speaking, we're embarrassed. I'm not a neophyte. I've been in the movement for 20 years. How can I be a neophyte? Those are for the uninitiated devotees. As soon as I became initiated, I became almost a Mahabhagava, at least on the liberated platform, because my spiritual master accepted all my sinful reactions. And therefore it's up to him. I'm depending on him, because I wouldn't have accepted him unless he was a Mahabhagavad, all merciful. He's going to purify me in spite of the fact that I don't want him to. But causelessly, he's going to save me. Now, in the neophyte stage, up until the time and beyond the time, but we should understand that in the neophyte stage, my main business is not to roll on the ground in ecstasy or pretend that I'm a liberated soul, that I really don't need the process of pure devotional service, because there's many devotees who leave the movement, they claim they're always remembering Krishna, even if they don't chant Hare Krishna, even if they don't follow any principles, somehow or another, they're always remembering Krishna. Although that's difficult for even those who are strictly following, somehow or another, when you're liberated from all the rules and regulations, Krishna always appears in your heart at that time, according to them. No, the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. Well, as much as possible, we can say. Or when we're not hearing, we should be remembering what we've heard. So this is called Shravana Dasa, the stage of hearing. So hearing is very important. The whole world is based, the whole materialistic civilization is based on hearing, and the spiritual existence is based upon hearing too. Whether we're in material consciousness or spiritual consciousness will just depend upon what we're hearing. By constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of Krishna and hearing of his transcendental form, quality, and pastimes, one can attain to the stage of acceptance called Varna Dasa. So we keep on chanting and hearing about Krishna, gradually we'll surrender and we'll actually follow what Krishna tells us to do. That's a gradual process too. So while we're hearing and chanting, gradually we come to the platform of Varna Dasa. We surrender and we actually start following what Krishna tells us to do. When he attains the stage, he becomes attached to the hearing of Krishna Katha, because he realizes it actually has a purpose. We're not just going to class to show that we're good persons, good devotees. We're not going to class simply to develop an appetite for the prasadam that's served afterwards. We're actually getting some benefit from the hearing and chanting, that it makes some sense to my life. It has some purpose in my life, so that when I apply it, I actually get some happiness and some detachment from my suffering.
Maharaj, I apologize sincerely, and I beg your pardon, but please do remember that, I'm trying here simultaneously to translate you, please. Sorry.
Thank you for reminding me. Okay, keep on reminding me. So we have to remember that we should be getting something from this hearing and chanting, at least some determination to improve our devotional service, to hear and chant more, to hear and chant better, to serve more. And then when one attains this stage, he becomes attached to the hearing of Krishna Katha. When one is able to chant in ecstasy, attains the stage of Smarana Vasta, the stage of remembering. So that ecstasy is not a product of our great personalities, our great material prowess. the number of followers we have, the number of wealth we've gotten, even that fact that I become liberated from some of my miseries. The stage comes from actually accepting ourselves as tiny servants of Krishna and crying out to Krishna with devotion to accept us. Then Krishna, out of compassion, that he reveals himself in the heart of the devotee, and one can experience the happiness, the ecstasy that Krishna's devotees are experiencing. One becomes receptive to it. Recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance, and trance to the 5 items of progressive Krishna Smarana. So that comes in gradual stages. And Prabhupada says, at first, remembrance of Krishna may be interrupted at intervals, but later remembrance proceeds uninterrupted. When remembrance is uninterrupted, it becomes concentrated, and it's called meditation. When meditation expands and becomes constant, it's called anusmriti. By uninterrupted and unceasing anusmriti, one enters the stage of samadhi or a spiritual trance. So this gradual increase of our hearing and chanting and our devotional service, our acceptance and our understanding, and therefore being able to chant with offenselessly, means that we'll actually, Krishna first reveal his name, the fact that his name is none different from himself. Then the name will appear within our heart simultaneously with Krishna's form. We'll experience his qualities. We'll remember his past, his associates and their activities. And this is all the nature of spiritual bliss, because Krishna's name, his form, his quality, his associates and the pastimes are the same ecstatic, loving quality as Krishna. And therefore one becomes addicted to Krishna consciousness. So this is compared to the stage of, in the Bhagavad Gita, where one becomes, as Prabhupada said, he begins this, the verse, Tesham Sadatam, Tesham Yesham Antakatam Bhapam. The devotional service begins with pious religious life, austerity, truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy. In other words, becoming somewhat human. Then it proceeds to living a pious life. For those who are suffering, religious life is necessary because one is suffering because of sinful life, because of illicit sex, gambling, beating, and intoxication. But by these religious principles, one's suffering diminishes. And then one can accept pious life. One can understand the value of protecting the cows and the bull. One can understand the value of service to the Brahmins, etc., or the sannyasis. So when life becomes more pious, one is not only interested in freeing oneself from problems of material existence, but one actually becomes interested in something positive of service, even if it has some quality of materialism within it. Next, one realizes that beyond a pleasant material life is a liberated life, free from the problems not only this lifetime, but in the future lifetimes. And therefore one takes an interest in hearing, chanting more. And then when one can understand more clearly the power of sacrifice to Krishna, whether in the realm of Varna and Ashram or in the realm of pure devotional service, then one becomes liberated. One can tolerate sinful reactions, as Prabhupada says, and accept actual devotional service. Then one can rise up to the pure knowledge of the personality of Godhead. That means one can see Krishna everywhere, all the time. One can see Krishna in the pages of the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam. The whole world becomes alive in Krishna consciousness. And then finally, as it comes to the end here in this verse, one can meditate in trance upon the personality of Godhead, because one falls in love with Krishna. He sees how wonderful Krishna is, how sweet Krishna is, how sweet and wonderful Krishna's devotees are. And therefore one becomes addicted to Krishna. Then after that, it says here, after Smarana Dasa or Samadhi has fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original constitutional position. So now we've come to the stage of Bhava Bhakti and coming into Prema. At that time, he can perfectly and clearly understand his eternal relation with Krishna, that is called Sampati Das, perfection of life. So this is meant for all of us. It is not meant for Srila Prabhupada or for some liberated souls. There's plenty of room in the spiritual world for everyone. Every living entity is supposed to be in the spiritual world, but somehow or another, there's a few of us down here. But the aim of life is to go back to where we came from, or at least back to our original consciousness, even in this lifetime. So then Prabhupada concludes, because he's talking about Prema Bhakti at this stage, and the different progressive stages after that. Chaitanya Charitamrita advises that those who are neophytes to give up all kind of motivated desires and simply engage in the regular devotional service to the Lord, going to the directions of Scripture. In this way, the neophyte can gradually develop attachment to Krishna's name, fame, form, qualities, and so on. So here we are in Sadhana Bhakti, and now we're going to Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti in the next line. When one has developed such attachment, he can spontaneously serve the lotus feet of Krishna, even without following the regular principles. This is called Raga Bhakti, or devotional service in spontaneous love. So this is the advanced stage of Sadhana Bhakti, after one is free from the influence of material qualities. At this stage, the devotee can follow in the footsteps of one of the eternal associates of Krishna in Vrindavan. This is called Raganuga Bhakti. Raganuga Bhakti, or spontaneous devotional service, can be executed in the Shanta Rasa when one aspires to be like Krishna's cows, with a stick or flute in the hand of Krishna, or the flowers around Krishna's neck. In the Dasa Rasa, one follows in the footsteps of servants like Chitraka, Bhadraka, or Rataka. In the friendly Sakya Rasa, one can become a friend like Baladev, Sridama, or Sudama. In the Vatsala Rasa, characterized by parental affection, one can become like Nanda Maharaj and Jasoda. And in the Madhurya Rasa, characterized by conjugal love, one can become like Srimati Radharani or her lady friends, such as Lalita and her serving maids Manjaris, like Rupa and Rati. This is the essence of all instruction in the matter of devotional service. So this develops at the stage of bhava. A hint of there is at the stage of asakti, where one is always is at the stage where one is seeing internally and externally everything is Krishna's pastimes, or Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, or externally as Krishna has spoken to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. In any case, the idea that Prabhupada didn't give us everything in his books is more or less propagated by persons who don't know what reality is. And therefore they missed the clear explanations that Prabhupada is giving us about the different stages of devotional service. And therefore we should act on the level of devotion that we're at, and that will actually bring us to the higher levels of devotional service. We're supposed to act in such a way at the present time as to experience transcendental love and ecstasy, at least to some extent, even at this particular platform, by especially engaging in those 5 powerful processes, namely chanting the holy name without offense, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, worshiping the deities, serving the devotees, and making the atmosphere spiritual, and preaching Krishna consciousness. Preaching Krishna consciousness in the consciousness that we're doing it simply to please Krishna under the guidance of his elevated devotees. And under their guidance, we make friends with the devotees and cooperate with them to spread Krishna consciousness amongst ourselves and to the innocent, so we can defeat the atheistic propaganda that there is no God. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? And if we do that, Srimati Radharani will be pleased and our life will become perfect. Yes, Agnihotra.
Maybe necessarily with us asking after.
Can you hear me now? Oh, I guess.
Turn off your microphone.
Yes, Maharaj, I can hear you, but you didn't slow down at all since I asked. But thank you, Hare Krishna. I can hear you.
Okay, Guru Maharaj, I ask him. Гуру Махарадж, вы вот только что несколько минут назад упомянули, что некоторые преданные говорят о том, что в книгах Шрилы Прабхупады есть недостаточно знания и что у них есть свои теории. И вот я сталкиваюсь иногда с преданными, которые говорят, что в книгах книги Шрилы Прабхупады — это вводные книги в философию вайшнавов, но на самом деле нужно изучать книги ачарьев, и там все изложено на самом деле как надо, а книги Шрилы Прабхупады подводят к книгам ачарьев. И каково наше настроение должно быть к книгам Шрилы Прабхупады, и как мы должны правильно изучать книги ачарьев, чтобы не было и противоречия, и при этом такого высокомерного отношения, что вот ачарьи самое главное дали, а книги Шрилы Прабхупады — это так вот входная тренировка.
So, Guru Maharaj, we often hear this, that Srila Prabhupada's books are just, ABCs is just the beginning into our philosophy, but the real knowledge is in the books of the acharyas. So when people tell us this, what is our mood really have to be in relation to the books of Srila Prabhupada, and not to disrespect the acharyas, but also not to make them put them on the pedestal above Srila Prabhupada. What is the proper mood has to be in relation to the Srila Prabhupada's books and to the books of the acharyas?
Well, first let me ask Lamangalata, David, did you have the Nectar of Instruction? Were you reading from there in Russian?
Yes, Maharaj, I have been reading this in Russian, correct? Yes. Following you at the speed of light, yes.
You have to keep on reminding me. There is no competition between Srila Prabhupada and the acharyas. If we think there's a competition, it's because we're in the competitive mood. That if you try to understand if you've read Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, you'll see that Prabhupada was very merciful to us. Because even Prabhupada just couldn't understand his spiritual master at times. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not writing for Westerners. He was writing very elevated philosophy, and his philosophy is meant for a particular time, place, and circumstance. But everything he said was perfect, and therefore there's no harm of reading Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. We just may find it more difficult to understand how to apply it. Now, of course, when we read Srila Prabhupada's books, if we don't read with some kind of attention, and if we don't read in some kind of order, and we don't try to understand, pray to Krishna as the super soul to help us understand it, what we're reading, then of course we may think that somehow or another Prabhupada missed something. I don't know exactly what they think he's missed. He certainly didn't miss Krishna. And since our philosophy is quite simple, this idea that Prabhupada didn't give us everything is almost like saying that Krishna didn't give us everything, because it's so simple. Simple in the sense that now we're conditioned souls, but we're souls. And Krishna is God. As he says, he has unlimited beauty. What more do you have to know? Other than if you want to become happy, that you have to become aware of the person who has unlimited beauty, who has unlimited knowledge. If we develop our relationship with him and he reveals himself, that what more can we expect? And to think that if we perform devotional service, that Krishna is somehow or another incapable within our heart to reveal himself to us, and that we have to take some other process in order to invoke Krishna's mercy, as if Krishna doesn't know what will actually invoke his mercy, that someone else has to tell us, some other esoteric path of doing it. That it's not enough to be sincere, and Krishna realizing our sincerity in performing what he came to do personally as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to spread Krishna consciousness to the conditioned souls of this age. But we think that Krishna wasted his time, and that there was actually a better process than he gave us of getting enlightenment than spreading that participating in and spreading the Sankirtan movement. Then I don't know who they're trying to get mercy from. We're certainly not Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna. So I don't know who they're directing their philosophy towards. Does that make sense to you, Agnihotra Prabhu?
Да, конечно.
Yeah, people want a quick, easy,
Спасибо.
therefore they're attracted to either materialism or becoming sahajiyas. Sahaja means they want some cheap way of becoming Krishna conscious, invoking Krishna's mercy by some other path than actually sincerity. They think they can force Krishna to reveal themselves to them by some kind of mechanical path, where you don't have to sacrifice your energies in serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You can use the holy name, and then somehow or another, by your mental effort and speculation, force Krishna to reveal himself to you. But Prabhupada said that generally winds up, as his spiritual master explained, such people generally wind up in Radhakund, smoking bidis and having transcendental relationships with some of the lady Vrindavan vasis there, all in the name of the rasa dance. And remembering Krishna's most esoteric pastimes in the groves of Vrindavan. But that was not the path that Prabhupada or Acharyas took. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Gurudev. Please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. I have just a basic question. Like you were saying that this is a real thing, that without Krishna's mercy, nothing can happen. It's not just like we can think otherwise. So just basic question that can we what kind of mood we can just have like a prayerful mood? I don't know how to phrase this question, you know. I mean, can we have like a prayerful? Yeah, of course we should have prayerful mood, you know. I'm sorry, Gurudev, I don't know how to phrase this question, but if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
We could try to have a prayerful mood, but if our mood during the day is different from prayers, because actually everyone is praying at every moment. Our desires are just forms of prayers. And Krishna is answering those prayers as the super soul and arranging our lives to according to what we deserve so that those prayers are satisfied. Now, if our prayer throughout the day is fighting for survival or trying to enjoy the material energy in different ways, and then we sit down to chant Hare Krishna and try to develop another mood after spending 22 hours in a completely different mood, then we'll find it very hard to get into the mood of chanting with prayerful mood to Krishna to engage in his service. But it becomes much easier if throughout the day we try to remember whatever we're doing in a prayerful way to serve Krishna. Then when we finally sit down, or stand or whatever to chant Hare Krishna, then it's much more likely we'll have some idea of what the proper mood of chanting is. If we put the iron in the fire, it gets hotter and hotter. But if we take the iron out of the fire and put it into ice water, then it gets cooler. And then we have to spend some time putting it back into the fire before it warms up again. So Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita that one should arrange one's life that throughout the 24 hours a day, one cannot help but think about Krishna. Of course, we may not be able to do that so easily, but if we try a little bit to improve every day, then we will improve a little bit every day. We don't have to become perfect devotees immediately. We just have to become better devotees every day. And then our chanting will gradually improve. Our reading of the books will improve. Our worship of the deities will improve. Our dealings with the devotees will improve. Our ability to create a spiritual atmosphere will improve. And our existence will improve. Antaryami, did that answer your question, Nityaseva Devidas?
Thank you.
Antaryami.
Krishna, Shiva Gurudeva, please accept my humble obeisances and all devotees, please through, and congratulations with Shri Adhashtami. Thank you very much for your mercy. You so regularly give us this opportunity, your lecture. Вы сказали, отвечая на вопрос Агнихотри Прабху, об эзотерическом смысле, об эзотерической теме, которая не является нашим путем, который нам дал Шрила Прабхупада. Могли бы вы чуть-чуть раскрыть, что такое эзотерический, что такое эзотерика, что такое эзотерический смысл вообще?
Хорошо, Прабху. Вы могли бы выключить свой микрофон, чтобы я себя не слышала?
Да, спасибо.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So answering Agnihotra Prabhu's question, you have mentioned that they are following the esoteric path. That is not our path. You said that Srila Prabhupada didn't give us this esoteric path. Could you please explain a little more? What does esoteric path actually means?
It's not an esoteric path. It's a false path. It means that they've complicated so much they actually believe that material is spiritual. It's a delusional path. It's not esoteric. It's illusory. It's an illusory path. The really esoteric path is given by Sri Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Instruction. esoteric means that at first we don't understand it, but if we follow that path, then by the mercy of Krishna and his pure devotees, then gradually Krishna will give us his mercy and enlighten us, and then we'll be able to understand it more clearly. But if we take a false path, not only will not understand what Krishna is saying, but the likelihood of degrading ourselves becomes greatly increased. Anything else?
Есть еще какие-то вопросы?
Okay. Thank you. Spasiba.
Uh,
Happy-
Guru Maharaj, Tirthapада Prabhu up his hand.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Hare Krishna.
Pranam. Can you please comment on the cost of living crisis and how the whole world might be going to a recession, and it's so difficult to just get by and live, and we're all working so hard, struggling, and how can we become Krishna conscious when it's just such a daily grind? And you know, there's so many factors against us with the energy crisis and global recession may be happening and potential wars. So how can we fight all these influences and still remain Krishna conscious?
Well, we should understand that all these things are happening by the grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He wants a great reset. Because presently, modern society, by its technology and industrialization, is heading towards the darkest regions of existence. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has manifested the great recess to bring us back to a more simple living, where we can actually understand that the real basis of economy, what it actually is, it's not this complicated technology and industrialization which has come about due to the slaughter of the cow and the bull. So he's trying to create an atmosphere where people will become more receptive to Krishna consciousness, including ourselves. So it's going to be difficult, because that which in the beginning is bitter like poison, and the end is just like nectar, which awakens one to self-realization, said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. Most of human society is absorbed in ignorance and passion. And so now the great reset is to simplify our lives so we come to goodness and become receptive to Krishna consciousness. So where our minds are not disturbed by this idea of a perfect life of sense gratification. Instead, sincere people, intelligent people, will be interested in finding another source of happiness other than the progress of materialism, namely Krishna consciousness. So we shouldn't think anything's happening. It's happening outside of Krishna's desire, because of people's sinful activities, they've created a sinful society where they're due sinful reactions. But those sinful reactions are mechanisms by which they'll become purified, simplified, and ultimately more receptive to the holy name, and therefore beginning the real actual golden age of Krishna consciousness.
Won't materialists seek answers in more technology?
What's that?
Won't materialists seek solutions in more technology?
Yeah, well, then they'll get more frustrated. That's what they're trying to, some class of people are doing that, but it's useless. Actually, what they're trying to do is trying to figure out the technology of killing more animals, killing more people, and ultimately they're killing themselves. So that's just part of the illusory energy. That everyone's going to get their karma, and even the people who so-called think that they're controlling everything, well, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, they'll be revealed that they're ultimately not the controllers either. They may think that they're going to control the world by technology, but actually they're just being controlled by illusion. They're not controllers either. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the controller. So they may try, increase their technology, but Mother Earth is not going to reciprocate with them. And therefore, those who understand the value of chanting, the value of simple living, they'll get the benefit of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. And others who want to take shelter of more technology, they'll simply get into more trouble, that's all. At the time of death, your iPhone will not save you. Okay,
Thank you, Gurudev. I have an Android on site.
well, hopefully your Android will save you. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Happy Radhastami ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you, Lavanga Lata Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna.